Okay, thanks, Heather. That sounds like kind of like a blast off, but in any event, here we go. Good morning, everybody. I think we got all the participants. There might be a few drifters coming in as we move along. Thanks for taking the time to attend, this LaBella project management training session. I looked through the list, the names on the attendee list, and recognizing there is a good percentage of you that I have not met yet. By way of introduction, I'm Mike Winderl. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at LaBella. I've been working with the project management team on, initiating this course. So the first session we'll talk through today, it's more general in nature. It's with a focus on project manager responsibilities from a distant view, while also building familiarity on what's to come down the pike here for you in this training session, and what you'll see in future sessions in the program. So our agenda for today is that I'll speak for about 45 to 50 minutes. We'll take a short break, and then you're going to see a video on how clients buy, which you see here in the PM program under session 2. I also wanted to encourage people to ask questions, either by, feel free to interrupt, ask a question, or if you put something in the chat or raise your hand, Heather can help me with that because I may not be able to see it all. But, this is intended to be interactive to the extent we can be in 50 minutes. So, don't hesitate to speak out or ask a question if you're confused on anything. I also wanted to point out, we do get feedback. We have done a handful of these sessions to date, and we do, as you will get as well, some survey on feedback on what we can do better and different. Some of the things we see is that, maybe, this training should be done before some people jump into, being a project manager. So we're looking at that, and also recognize, that this course and the audience that we have will, impact different people in different ways, because we have a large cross section. We have some people that are down the road in their careers as a project manager, while we have others that are maybe just being initiated to it, and maybe to the extent also people that have an interest in it. So we ask you to, bear with us as we move through this. If you're a more experienced PM, you may find some of these things very familiar to you. So we're trying to capture the full audience in these sessions. Another line of thought is that these sessions should also be done in person. I agree that would be more interactive. Maybe we could expand the time frames, that type of thing. Something we're looking at, but we do have a lot of people from a lot of different offices here, and we've been running these sessions virtually, first coming out of COVID because we had to, and we kind of stayed on the same track. So we are listening to the feedback we get. So when you get your surveys, we'd like to hear that, because like you'll hear in project management training, we're always looking for continuous improvement. So looking at the agenda here, again, you'll see session 1 and session 2 today. And, we do have an additional handful of sessions that we'll talk through with you as we move along. So what is project management? We'll talk through today, more so along the lines on project manager overall big picture responsibilities. This course is intended to talk more about LaBella's PM program and how we do it. We've also heard feedback, there's many courses out there on project management, more in-depth. There's all types of programs. This is more of a condensed version of project management at LaBella. And I don't say just today, I'm talking about the courses and sessions you'll see down the road. We'll talk a little bit about what is a PM today, what does it take, is it for you? There's certain, obviously, PM skill sets, credentials, and expectations. I think one of the things I've talked to with other sessions and some of the questions around this, we're reaching a broad-based audience. And I think with our growth here in LaBella, we've asked many people to step up and run projects, maybe sometimes with, people's will and desire to do that, not fully understanding it. Some people think they want to get into it, but in the growing organization, we're always looking for good project managers, people that have a real drive to run projects and have the credentials associated with that to do so. So we'll talk a little about that today. And then, again, you'll see a video later on how clients buy, which runs into really session 2. So with that, we can move on, Heather.
Just a quick administrative note, Mike, which for those of you who are traveling, I realize it may be difficult to have your cameras on, but we do like it when everybody's got their cameras on, if they do have a camera for these presentations, so we can see people shining happy faces.
Okay, thanks, Kat. I can see a total of 3 people, and one of them is you. So I'll keep it. You guys can keep your eyes on the cameras there and people asking questions or raising their hands. So with this slide, before we progress, we wanted to start with a short plug for LaBella's core values. Hopefully you've all seen at some point in your tenure with LaBella this slide. For purposes of this presentation, as I looked at this, I wanted to focus really on just the first 2. Not that the other 2 aren't important, but I think as it relates to project management, honesty and integrity in all we do and stewardship of resources are directly applicable in some way to project management. In starting with honesty and integrity in all we do, I think as a project manager, you will find yourself in difficult situations, no doubt. One of the things we ask you to do, again, as a project manager, always exhibit honesty and integrity in what you do. Your clients and your team will both be rating you and evaluating you from that perspective on a continuous basis. And we ask that you maintain honesty and integrity as you work through the projects that you're working on and are assigned to. Second, the stewardship of resources. You're not just managing internal resources. I think when a lot of people look at that, they look at, my team and the how I conduct business with this team and schedule and work with the team. That's one part of it too. That's the management of LaBella's financial commitment and organizational skills of that team. But I think I would also ask, you look at this also from the client standpoint. You're a stewardship of their resources as well, which is really their program, what they came to you to accomplish, what they're trying to make happen. And you have to be aware and willing to work with them and what they're trying to do, how they're trying to get it done, and also from a budget standpoint, managing that and what they've committed to spend. So those are 2 core values that I think are directly applicable to project managers. And we ask you to, pay attention to those as you look at your projects. So with that, Heather, we'll move on. So any questions yet? Anybody want to ask anything before I move along and jump into some slides here? Do we have any hands raised or any questions, Heather? About why we're here, what we're doing, and what's what the program is. Okay. So we'll move on. So I think we got to advance one slide here, one more. Okay, here we go. Project management. So on the left, you see really what project management is the practice of. And, with time constraints, I'm not going to read through these slides. We're going to talk big picture. But what you see, the practice there, that's certainly not an exhaustive listing. That's just, part of what the practice of project management is. And I think 2 words you'll probably hear a lot of in your career as a project manager is leadership and communication. Are two big things that I think, you're going to need in running that practice of project management. As we look at the process groups, part of our agenda, PM training sessions 3 through 6 that you're scheduled to participate in are built around these process groups. So there's a session that will be associated with all of the processes that you see outlined there. Initiating and closing a project are really a one-time event for the most part. What I want you to focus on and take a look at here is the planning, executing, monitoring, controlling of a project, because that's really a repetitive cycle as a project manager that you'll go through in multiple phases of a project. And I hope as you see the courses that are prepared for each one of those pieces of the process group, you'll start to see how that all comes together in good project execution. So with that, we can move on to the next slide, Heather. So here you see in black bold here is managing risk. Managing risk is big. The environment we work in now is more geared towards managing risk than it's ever been before, with the amount of claims that come in, frivolous claims, sometimes claims that can surprise you as a project manager. We hope that you never see these, but they're alive and well in our business, and many of them are what we consider frivolous claims, where you can get brought into certain situations where a client or maybe some second tier party comes in with a claim on a project. But how do you avoid claims or anything of that nature? And how do you maintain a solid, steady project is by managing your risk. Project management is not just managing resources, it's managing risk for both the client and LaBella. It's real in all these boxes that you see on the perimeter here, some at a higher level than others, just by their very nature. I would focus, and I know there's a lot of information available now on our intranet under the operations page. QC processes and reviews are very important now. Not that they weren't before, but the bulk of the risk, in my experience going through this, comes back to QC processes and reviews, as well as proposal contract, what you're signing up to do, what's in your scope of work, and making sure you've delivered all those things. I think Sue Cat and her team have done a great job putting together guidelines and processes that can help you with these things. And I'd point out before we leave this slide, the piece on communication. You're going to hear that word. It's a buzzword all over in our business, but communication is key in managing risk, and not just with your internal team, but with your client. You need to stay close with your client, understand what they're doing, making sure you're getting feedback on how your team is performing, how you're communicating with them, and making sure you stay on base. One other point of that is in team experience. The projects can be very different. You can have a multidiscipline project with many disciplines, many divisions coming into play, or you can have a single discipline project where you can have more control over your team experience, because chances are, if you are a project manager for a single discipline project, you know very much what's going on in that particular discipline. I would encourage you, if you are working on a multidiscipline project, understand your team experience, credentials, and also what that team's QA, QC process is for their particular discipline, that you roll up into a bigger picture quality control process for the entire project. Client relationship is key there. Don't let your client become distant from you. Stay close and manage the risk, and make sure you're on the same page with your client as you move along through the process. Documentation is key. Appropriate level of documentation is another thing. Some clients, and again, this is part of understanding your client, feel like sometimes too much documentation could be a way of just backing them into a corner. Be very careful with your documentation. Some of it remains internal, some of it's external, but make sure you document your projects as you move along. Notes on plans, I know will get talked about in down the line here. Very critical point in the QA/QC process, and as it relates to drawings versus specs, notes on drawings, all those types of things. And I know you'll get into more discussion around that because we could talk for an hour just on that alone. So I think with that, we'll move on to the next slide. I will stop and ask, anybody have any questions, any concerns that you want to ask at this point? So here's just a little background on, LaBella PM program. We'll backtrack a bit. There's a lot of things here. When we initiated this back in 2019, where we started a course, realizing that, while there are a lot of training courses out there on project management at a higher level, this is more geared towards how we do it in LaBella. And you see that under what? The LaBella way. This is how we expect projects to run and how the process generally goes. And there'll be training on all the bits and pieces that come into play in the LaBella project management process. Why? Good project management, it leads to reduced risk, satisfied clients, more efficient, effective, profitable projects, and a better experience for you as a project manager. We're going to talk about appropriate skills and people that have a desire to manage projects. You'll hear a little bit, I'll talk in an upcoming slide, this may not be or isn't for everybody to be a PM. And this isn't about what I refer to as a scared straight program where we go through enough things that convince you that you don't want to be a project manager anymore. But, you continually have to rate yourself as a PM to make sure you feel like you have the right credentials, right experience to be a project manager. We've done this across divisions in all offices. We've done more than a handful of training classes. We are getting good feedback and look forward to hearing what you have to say when the course is done as well. And how do we do this? We do it through this training courses. We have resources available for continuous improvement and reinforcement of the way that things need to be done. So as your project management team training you as you go down the line, don't hesitate to reach out and ask questions when you feel like you need help or assistance. So with that, we'll move on to the next one. So here's as you recall in one of the previous slides, we had the processes outlined on LaBella's PM program and the reciprocating internal 3 processes, as well as the first 2 that the 2 or 3 there that I said are one-time deals. But we'll go through, again, courses are designed around these process elements. I think that you'll get very good, valuable information. I would just talk a little bit here about number 2 to get you off on the right foot. Defining a project and developing a proposal are very critical because that's a piece that you're signing up for as the project manager. You and your PM will have, as you move into step 3, a contract in place, a scope of work, a budget, a fee, a schedule. It's very key that you get that piece in line with what your thinking is, what the client's thinking is, so that you have a good roadmap to lead your team through the other processes that we have outlined here. So with that, we'll move on to the next slide. So I like this slide a little bit because I think, again, for those of you that have been a project manager for some period of time, you've probably seen these things. we like to use this as a precursor because we like to see a LaBella project manager as somebody who can mitigate and effectively control these typical responses that you might hear from your project team. Many times these things are real. My word of advice, you stay ahead of these things and be prepared to address them as they come up. Uh, it's very common that you can have a terrible contractor and the construction manager was a pass-through. You know, that would be more likely on a larger multidiscipline project. But the best way to work through that is to have solid documents that you know have been checked. You've had your quality control in place. And you can stand behind what you've put out to the, you know, for bidding on the streets, and you're able to execute that design to construction transition. Team incompetent and didn't care. I would advise you as a project manager to not come to that point in your thinking. And the way to do that is, you know, stay ahead of the team as well, constant communication, make sure that you don't let your team drift. You got to keep them together. And again, project plans and project execution is different for different sized projects. One of the things you need to do is assess the project that you're assigned as project manager on and build a appropriate plan and communication path, schedule, all those things that allow you to keep the team engaged at the appropriate level, because one plan does not fit all. And that's one of the skill sets critical to a good PM, is knowing what level of planning is necessary, what level of communication is necessary. And I say that in regards to project meetings, project communications. You could have a project that runs for as little as 2 weeks, or you could have a project that runs for 2 years. So, or even longer. The project keeps changing. It's one of the more difficult things for a project manager, is managing scope creep with your client and with your team. That's why I, you know, went back to in the earlier slides, making sure that that proposal and contract is solid, something that you and your team both fully understand. Because managing scope creep and getting out of scope on a project is a very difficult thing to manage with a client. Sometimes it's easier than with other clients, but it's a very difficult thing to manage. And we can again have another 1-hour conversation on how to manage scope creep. Budget was unrealistic. We've seen throughout the processes here, you know, buy-in from your team on their fees and their scope, and the correlation between the two can be a real challenge. My advice to you is you do the best you can to get buy-in from each discipline that's on your project, to get a scope and a budget that align with each other so that you can avoid that kind of discussion. Now, insofar as the construction budget and the client's expectations were unrealistic, you have to hit that head on before you move into contract phase. That's something that should happen before you get into contract, and it has to be discussed during the proposal. I didn't have enough help. We are a big company now. Chances are you're going to be drawing your resources from a lot of different areas. This is where communication and commitment of resources is very important, because you could very likely run into a design team that's looking at multiple projects with concurrent schedules. And you have to keep people close and make sure you have your commitments, including their supervisors, on the commitment you're getting from staff to complete your project. Don't assume it's going to happen. You should verify and validate that you have the resources and the time to complete the project on schedule and within budget. The client is impossible is a whole different discussion. You know, we have different types of clients just across the board, which can be different in how you approach them, how they react, how they treat you. That's part of knowing your client when you sign up to be the project manager for the job. Um, and my advice is you stay close with that client, no matter who they are. We all know developer clients, those types of clients can be very difficult in some cases, just due to the commodity approach they take to our services. That's very real in many cases. They look at us as just a commodity. Those are clients, that we rate continuously to see if we want to continue to do business with them, particularly now at this point in time in the firm with the volume of work we're seeing and the success rate we're having at getting new work. We're starting to screen out some of these clients and whether or not we want to continue to do work for them. And I would reemphasize that many times that is on the developer private side. My experience has been state agencies and municipal clients can be easier to work with in this regard. So I just point that out based on personal experience. Everyone kept charging the job. That's part of communicating with your team and monitoring your budget. Many times we hear that type of claim once it's too far down the road. Stay ahead of that and make sure you keep your team informed on what they've expended on the project. And that goes down all the way down the line to all the different divisions and disciplines that may be involved in the project. If it comes back, it could evolve back into the scope creep discussion. And that's why I say it's difficult being a PM and navigating through that. And you are the ultimate gatekeeper on whether or not we are in or out of scope on what we're asking the team to do on a particular project. So that's all I wanted to say. Any questions on this slide? Any thoughts? Anybody want to add anything? I'm going fast and I'm talking quick, but we'll probably have some time at the end here for general discussion and questions. So be thinking about that. Okay, so again, this is just a broad-based look at what a project manager is. Again, you'll be, as a PM, providing project management for all aspects of assigned projects. I emphasize there all aspects because, again, as we get into multidiscipline project management, a lot of times we find, project managers feel like, the end of the responsibility really is the discipline that they're representing, and where that project originated from. And that's not true. A PM has to be responsible for the full team. And it's not something that we like to see people let that, linger and go down a negative path and then look in the rearview mirror and throw back, why didn't you keep your budget and why didn't you keep on schedule here with delivery? And they go right to a division director or a supervisor with that problem really once it's too late to resolve. You need to stay in front of that and head that off before it gets to that point. It takes time, it takes commitment, and sometimes it takes difficult conversations. So I would point that out. I would also point out there the emphasis on a appropriate kickoff meeting. Kickoff meetings are really critical. And it's at that point in the project where you attempt to get the buy-in from the team and the client on where you're going with your project. It's scaled differently. Again, not all projects are the same. Part of project manager finesse is being able to scale a kickoff meeting appropriately to the project size that you have for the duration of the project, depending, bringing back into picture how many meetings you're going to have, how often you're going to touch base, and how often you're going to put the documents on the table as a team and understand that you're on schedule, you're on budget, and you're moving in the right direction. Not the same for all projects, and it'll be your discretion as the person running that project to determine how frequently you run meetings, how frequently you touch base on budget. Many projects could be over before you really even have much time for that. But get in front of it, hold your kickoff meeting, and make sure you have buy-in and commitment from your team. Then once you do that, the next item here is I would summarize that with, don't let your team drift. Stay close to them. That's where you see charges and things happening that you may not understand on a project. You can't let your team drift. You have to build relationships and rapport with your team members and make sure they recognize you as that leader. That's something you earn. It's not something that's generally granted to you simply because you're labeled the PM. And I would look at the third item here, and I would talk really about the three big items that you'll hear continuously: scope, schedule, and budget. That's really what item 3 there is about. And I think as part of being the PM, I also encourage you to be approachable. Sometimes people get frustrated with project managers and they just say, the old, I'm not going to deal with him or her. And that's when they start drifting. Part of the way of earning that respect and keeping people committed and on base and on target, you need to be trusting and fair in how you treat people. We certainly are going through an audit process now that we're starting to initiate in evaluating PMs. I certainly hear a lot, from different teams and divisions, about PM behavior and PM approach. We certainly have people that are better at it than others, and it's all comes in their approach and how they execute projects. Part of what we want to teach through this program is be a fair, trusted, honest project manager that keeps your team committed, engaged, and allow them to be able to come talk to you when they feel like there's an issue on a project. So with that, we'll move on to the next slide. Okay, so key PM portraits or traits here. There's quite a few bullets there. I would just encourage you in a little self-reflection, because this is a long, exhaustive listing, to understand that not everybody can be strong at all of these things. You're certainly going to be better at some of these things than others. What you want to strive to do is be balanced. Be balanced at these things, work to your strengths, understand your weaknesses, and find a way to touch base on all of these items listed, and pay attention to all those. Those are key traits that people look for in their PM. And I just talked through some of that, good leadership skills, good listener, strong problem solving. And the one big thing I would talk about in here in this particular slide, because it is real and alive and well, is conflict management. That means both internal team and client. Being able to resolve conflicts in the appropriate way is probably one of the strongest skills of a project manager, because it will happen, it will come up, and you need to know how to manage conflict within your team and with your client. That's a part where sometimes people just shy away, close their eyes, and hope for the best. Usually that's not effective. So I encourage you to look through these and do a little self-assessment of where you think you are as you look at these traits. Get training and help on ones that you think you need to get better at, and while also working to your strengths on the ones that you're good at. One thing that I also wanted to talk about in this slide is very possible that you will be a project manager for more than one project. So multitasking and being able to handle concurrent projects while also maybe being a design member on another team. We're in this world of consulting, and it's very seldom that we're assigned to one project. You could be a project manager on one job and a team member on another. watch how your project manager behaves on projects where you're performing services and hold them accountable to the things that we're teaching. So I think, you need a good overall balance of these skills, and I would continue to encourage, self-reflection to help you develop strength to the best of your ability in all of these areas. I think we do have finally one question here, but I can't see it. So Heather, if you can help
Sure.
me.
It says, will conflict management be gone through in more detail with scenarios and best resolutions? That's from Chris Fink.
Chris, I think it will be gone through at a higher level, but maybe, again, like I've said in many of these things, that would probably be a lengthy class in and of itself. I don't know, Kat or Sue, if you want to comment at all here on the conflict management and how deep you go into that in the sessions, but it's certainly something that we could look at as, scenarios, because we could create many of them. And talk through those, but it would be an exhaustive session. So
Exhaustive and exhausting, but it is probably, a couple of key things, the skills here for project managers. Probably the key skill that Mike mentioned earlier that's going to come across again and again and again is communication. Being a good communicator in all ways, shapes, and forms is key to being a good project manager. And sometimes, even when think we're doing a great job of communication, there can be conflicts just because different people hear things different ways. And the session where we talk about conflict management, we do touch on a few different approaches, but we do not go into significant depth. I encourage all of you to, when you're provided with the feedback forms, provide us that kind of input, because we are looking to do monthly PM roundtables and have some supplemental training sessions in 2023. And if that's a topic that's of interest, we've all been in positions where there's been conflict, and sharing ideas on how to manage those, I think, would be incredibly valuable for folks, because that is probably one of the hardest things that we have to deal with.
yeah, it's a great question, Chris. And I think, we do have a few minutes here. So I would just elaborate. Conflict management with your client is something you really should be talking through with a supervisor when you get backed into situations where you have to make decisions. That's something that, internally we can handle internal conflict management differently than we can really handle external conflict management. But, when we get into conflict management with our client, I think that's where there's going to be many clients that will test you. They're going to see if you'll go beyond scope. They're going to see what they can push. They're going to start the conversations around, well, I'm not very happy about this, and maybe next time I'll go somewhere else with my project. And those kinds of things generate feelings of failure to a PM. This isn't for people that are the weak of heart. And it can put you in a very awkward situation. And I think when you do get backed into conflict management with your client, make sure that your supervisor is aware of some of the issues you're dealing with, and get advice, get backing, and get support in the approach that you're taking. I have seen many times in my career where, clients, they're not hesitant to go around you, to go to somebody up the ladder. And that's where it starts, where somebody didn't agree with what you did with your client. That generates a problem, and the best way to alleviate that is to get consultation and approach from your supervisor or experienced PM, and how you should approach that. And part of what's going to come into play there is knowing who your client is, and how they're going to behave, and what they're going to push for. But it goes back to stewardship of resources. That's part of your responsibility. And there's going to be many clients that will try to push that envelope of what we've signed up to do versus what they want you to do. That's what I see as one of the biggest challenges. So I'm not sure if we 100% answered that question, but I think that we gave you some good guidelines there. So, you know, again, I would certainly recommend that when you feel backed into a corner, particularly with your client, you know, that you get consultation with a more experienced supervisor or PM and how to address that and how to handle it. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so let's advance, Heather, to takeaways. So we move through this very quick. And again, this is just an overview of some, you know, PM oversight here, and you'll run through many, you know, the remaining classes here, the 4 classes that you're going to partake in. But what we want you to take away today is good project management. It's critical to our business. I don't think I need to tell you that projects are the building block of our business. That's what we are. You know, every project is a building piece to what we do as a company. And good project management is really a reflection of you and what you do with your team to make sure that's happening. You have a role to play. We've talked a lot about it. You're the focal point. You're the leader of that team. And you'll have a lot of eyes on you from your team and your client as you take on that responsibility of being the PM. Number 3, improvements. We understand the improvements in our PM practices are necessary. You know, we have a large volume of project managers. I don't have the number handy, the number of projects we run through this firm each year, but it's astronomical. You know, it is a large number of projects. So we always are looking at continuous improvement. We want to continue to run training sessions. We're getting through some of the first cycle of initial project management. Had more requests for classes to get more people involved. We're looking at that. But we want continuous improvement, and we don't see this as the end. You know, as we run through this initial course and reach out to people in the organization, will follow up with maybe more focused pieces in project management that we can bring forward to you, you know, down the line. Unified approach is powerful in how we approach our projects. You know, we want people to be thinking along the same lines through the training of how to approach the projects. I just think that also rolls down into your particular team. A unified approach is very powerful. Keep that team together, run your system, and keep people on track. So in number 5, a better client, employee, and financial experience. That is the end result of good project management. And our goal is to give you the tools, processes, and training to be effective. We realize that can't be all inclusive in a, you know, short training class, you know, that we're putting forward, but always feel free to reach out and look for resources and help when you feel challenged or you feel threatened on a particular project. So I believe that is it. We're right around 45 minutes. We have another question here. I think I can see this one. Is there a PM manual or PM guide we could review as a reference? Kat, we got a couple minutes. Do you want to share your screen on the operations page and just walk the team through?
Sure. Let's see. So here's what I'm going to do. Whoops. One second. I seem to have lost my screen sharing ability.
Oh, maybe only Heather can do that?
No, it's just has to do with which just bear with me 1 second. I've got to get the correct screen up. So you don't have to see all my emails. I'm having trouble with Zoom. It doesn't seem to want to do that.
Okay, well, we can just talk through it then. On the, maybe Kat, you're better suited to walk through what's on the operations page there under, your project management training piece.
Yep. So I guess if everybody could go on to LaBella today, and we'll kind of
Oh,
um, make this a kind of a walkthrough. If you go on to LaBella today, I seem to have lost you completely now. Can you hear
Sue's
me?
got it up.
it's
Oh, okay.
there, Kat. Sue, I
Yeah,
think Sue
I've
popped it in.
lost my Zoom completely. So if you go to the LaBella today and go to operations to quality GPS, that'll take you to our page, which is the combination of quality and project management documents, because you can't have good quality without good project management, and the reverse is also true. So we've combined everything into one page. And if you scroll down on the page, excuse me, under tools, this is where all of our primary reference documents are located. So our policy statement about our quality program. We do have a quality manual that goes through our quality program, a description of quality waypoints of the system. And then there's a list of a lot of the different resources and procedures and templates and checklists that we have for the system. And then in about halfway through the second column, you can see that there's a link to legal, a link to the operations form page, and various other links. And those take you to all the different spots within the intranet where you will find information that pertains to project management. The section that follows it is actually our PDFs of the presentations that we did last round. We posted them so that, following trainings, people could have a spot to go back and refer to in case they just wanted a refresher on something. And then in addition, at the very bottom of the page, we did provide you with a note as to where you can find the literature library for the company, which is something that we're currently working on this year. But that's a very brief overview. I'm sorry, I cannot see anybody because I just do not know where
No,
she went.
that's good. I mean, there's quite a few documents that cover quite a few things there.
There
And
we go.
I think a lot of the emphasis has been more on the quality aspects and maybe not so much on the soft skills of a PM. This is more process oriented, flow charts, and different sheets that are available to help you through different phases of a project. I see the course correction checklist, which may be something you would also look at in conflict management. But I mean, there's a lot of resources there. And again, I would encourage, just reach out to Kat or Sue Matzat or myself if you have particular questions on how to do a particular aspect of a project. And I think, some of the courses down the line will help you address some of this.
We will be reviewing a lot of these documents during the course of the training class that we're giving now. So.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, are there any books or other resources outside LaBella you found made you a better PM? I would speak personally. I think the most valuable way for me to become and I'm not going to say better PM, because I'd get rated just like the rest of you would get rated, whether or not I was a good PM. But you really find it, the best way is to start with a smaller project where you kind of get your feet wet if you're new and up and coming PM, and get exposed at a smaller scale before you find out you're in a big pool that you can't swim out of. Is the best way is on the job training. I personally have not found any books or anything that I utilized. It was more through attending classes just like this on project management that kind of gives you a inkling of how to approach things. And I think one of the best ways to become a better PM is to watch somebody you respect as a good PM and watch how they conduct themselves, watch how they run their projects, and start to model yourself after that type of person and how they get things done and how they behave as a project manager. I think that's the best way to get moving along and learn how to address situations.
And I agree with Mike. None of us are all going to have all the skills on that list that are 100% and, perfect and awesome, because we're all people and that's not how people are put together. So one of the things that, I found over my career is that there are certain things that I'm good at and certain things that I'm not so good at. And when you progress in your career, you will kind of figure out which ones those are. And then the key is to try and surround yourself with people in your team that can help you with the things that you're not necessarily quite so perfect at, and or get additional training on certain things that you can use to facilitate your growth as a project manager. I mean, good communication is, again, I'm going to keep coming back to that, but like I took a Dale Carnegie course on communication and leadership a couple years ago, and just being able to take that course, that for me, that was particularly helpful. But there's a lot of different resources that are out there. And part of it, though, is just, again, you kind of have to be introspective and listen to your team members, ask for feedback, ask them what you're doing well, what you're not doing well at. And, everybody's on their own road to self-improvement. And if we're honest with each other, we can all kind of grow and improve as we go along.
So I think we had one more question there just popped in. I wasn't able to see it.
He said that he liked your advice and your slides so far. He thought that maybe you should write that book.
There you go,
I don't
Mike.
know. I think
next
you'd have
career.
to go ask some people that have been on my team and ask them what they think. So maybe I missed my calling. So we're at 11:53. Anything else? So I think the plan now is what, Sue, a quick break, and then you're going to move into the next video.
Yeah, we'll take 10 minutes. So what's that? 12:03. And we'll return. Thank you,
Yeah.
Mike.
Yeah, Sue, can I just, one more comment I want to make is, there's a lot of times there's emphasis on project budget internally, and there should be. I mean, we're a business, we're not a not-for-profit, we're a business, and there should be focus on that. But I would leave you with, not every project is a winner. There are projects, sometimes you get into certain situations and you don't rate yourself in the end. You put your best foot forward and give it all you have on a project and walk away from it proud. They're not all winners. There's projects that don't go well and we lose on those, and there's projects we do well and we win on those. And it's a balance of the two that keeps us moving along as a profitable company. So understand sometimes things just don't go your way, and sometimes there are bad projects. So I would encourage you, you get up and you go at it the next day. And just, if you have a bad project, sometimes you do a little self-reflection, but I just want to emphasize they're not all winners. And you just got to put your best foot forward and walk away from it proud. And there's also that scenario sometimes where companies give their most difficult projects to their best PMs. And sometimes those projects are not winners, but the PM is, because they got us out of a situation, or they got us through it the best way we possibly could, while also holding honesty and integrity at a high level. So I would just, ask you to keep that in mind. Okay, so I think we'll take a break.
Yep, 12:05.
We're training him to be able to put it on, just for if we need it in an emergency, like a
So
right.
Kat, if you want to make some comments, and then we'll have Heather start the video.
Yep. So as you can see from the small image of Beth up there in the corner, typically Beth does this part of the session. She is ill today, so is not able to be here in person. So we have a previous recording that we're going to be share with you. So Heather, like if there are questions during the course of the presentation of this recording, can people still provide, we can still provide comments in the chat session, is that correct?
Correct. And then Sue, would you and Kat like to handle them at the end, or
Yeah, I think we would likely save them till the end.
okay.
Okay, so with that, I think we can start the recording.
And
we
if
apologize if
everybody
it
can
wasn't
give me a thumbs up or like thumbs down on volume, if you need it higher, let me know. All right. All right, here we go.
And I start off real quick with a poll. So I'll throw the poll up there and give people another minute or two to answer it while they're getting settled. Hopefully you guys can see this and feel free to answer. Okay, I'm going to call it. I'm going to start things up. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Beth Byrne. I'm Director of Marketing for LaBella. I sit in Rochester. And when we're not in the pandemic, I'm usually out and about and seeing all of you in all different offices. But I'm really excited to talk to you today and what I call is like a really quick crash course on sort of marketing, the basics that I kind of feel like hands need to know in order to help contribute to what we're trying to do. So we're certainly not going to hit everything, and not everything is going to resonate, because I know we've got some people coming from different areas of the company, and we've some transportation people, some environmental people. But I think we're going to hopefully have something that we'll have something to take away, and we can certainly always continue the conversation offline. So the first question that I like to start with is, have you ever taken a college level marketing class? And I'll share the results so you guys can see that. The answer is 90% of you haven't, which is not really surprising. And you may say, well, Beth, why do you ask that? And I ask for two reasons. One is because I want you to feel free to ask any question at any time, even if you think it's really, really basic, because as you can see, 90% of you have never had any formal marketing training at all. So there's no dumb question. But the second thing that I like to bring up just to start is this is insane, right? Because what you'll see across the board is that in most design or engineering curriculums, you'll see no marketing education whatsoever. And there's a historical reason for it. It's because, up until the 70s, the AIA actually prohibited marketing activities of any kind for architects. It was true for a bunch of different professions. So what you have is an industry that is relatively new to the idea of marketing itself. They haven't been doing it for very long. And the only way you could win projects for a really long time was knowing somebody who would just give it to you. And so as a result, a lot of the techniques that we see in our industry are left over from that time period where the only way you could get work was based on who you knew. And so that's how we sort of ended up with, maybe you'll see here, the old boys club. It was really important that you were sort of present in the right circles. And as a result, most people didn't have any marketing education in their technical degree programs. And I'll share with you, I was the same boat. My undergraduate degree is in interior design. I didn't have a single marketing class in my design education. And it wasn't until midway through my career, I went back and I did a master's degree in marketing. So that's sort of how I came to marketing. So I definitely came from where you're sitting today. This is insane, mostly because what is the number one way we know that you can quickly rise in a design or engineering or environmental firm? It's the easiest, simplest way to prove your value to the firm is to what? It's to help bring in work, right? And they don't give you any tools to do it. So we're going to talk a little bit today about some of the tools that I think you should be aware of. But know that your marketing team is here. We're a resource for you. We have the expertise in this area and for you to tap into. And we're happy to talk at any time and help you through this process. I like this little analogy. We're talking about marketing. We're going to talk about BD a little bit. They're not the same. I like to think that marketing is the tools and techniques we use that make it rain. And the rain makes all the worms come up. And then BD kind of swoops in and grabs those worms. So, one of the things Bob Healy used to always say, at a certain point in your career, your job is to help feed the family, right? Is to come back and bring projects for people to work on. And if you're a project manager, that's going to be part of your responsibilities now too, is also to help get the next project. So that's why we're talking about marketing in PM training. You don't have to be great at business development to help with our marketing efforts. Obviously, we wanted you to try BD and do lots of different things, but they're actually two different skill sets and two different approaches. And I'm going to talk a little bit about marketing specifically, and then we'll get into some of the proposal process, which I consider business development. So if you haven't had any formal marketing education, chances are your experience with marketing is being marketed to, right? As a consumer, you probably experience marketing at you all the time. And that kind of marketing is called B2C marketing or business to consumer marketing. And the first thing I want you to learn or take away from today is that there's two subsets of marketing. There's B2C marketing, where you'll find Nike, your grocery stores, all the consumer brands that you know and love. And then there's B2B marketing, which is business to business marketing, which is when we're marketing to other businesses who need things like copiers, like travel, like training, like software, and like, yes, architecture, engineering, and environmental consulting. So that's the area that we're talking about. And a lot of the tools and techniques that make sense for big consumer brands just don't make sense for us, right? We never run a sale on substation design, right? We've never clipped a coupon for our next fire station, right? So there's definitely some strategies that make sense for what we do. And we actually have a subset of marketing within business to business marketing called the marketing for professional services. And we have a professional organization that's called SMPS, which is the Society of Marketing for Professional Services, that I belong to, and lots of your marketing team belongs to. And there's a lot of great resources there if you're interested in learning more about marketing. Within this category, you have firms like us. You have accounting and financial firms, law firms, and other kinds of consultants. And the reason why we're all together is because we have a similar buying process. We are often selling a product that our customer cannot hold, right? They do not know what bridge design they're going to get when they hire us to design the bridge. They don't necessarily know what your environmental report is going to look like before they hire us to do it. So in all these areas, we're selling something that they can't hold or see. We're selling based on the idea of our past work experience. And these can be very high value procurements, contracts in the thousands of dollars, even millions of dollars. And there also can be high risk, right? Certainly if you're getting ready to head to trial, who your attorney is a high risk decision, right? So this is why we're all in the same space together, and it's because our clients make decisions similarly. So within SMPS, there's a ton of resources that I, look at all the time. We go to an annual conference called Build Business, and it's filled with just people who have my job. There's a great magazine out there called Marketer it's all the latest research and development when it comes to marketing, architecture, engineering, and environmental consulting services. Why do I tell you that? Because what I'm going to share with you today is all based on research. It's based on best practices. I will be very transparent with you when I'm sharing you something with you that's my opinion. But this is where a lot of the research that I'm going to share with you today comes from. So, and certainly these resources are available in our offices with our marketing team if you're interested in diving into more after today. So I like to start off my presentation by telling you guys a story about the time when I had to buy professional services. So this was back in 2018, and we had made the decision to rebrand LaBella. So I had to go out and I had to buy services from an advertising agency to help us with our rebranding project. So I had a lot in common with a lot of our clients, right? This was a very high risk decision in terms of whatever the results of this was, we were going to live with it for a really long time, maybe not as long as a road or a bridge, but certainly we're not going to rebrand every few years. So whatever the results of this was, we were going to live with it for a while. It was very high visibility. All of you guys were going to see it. Wanted to make sure it was done right. And it wasn't something that I get to do every day, right? I hadn't hired a branding consultant before, and I haven't done it since. So high risk, certainly the most amount of money we'd ever spent on a marketing initiative to date, high value. And so we evaluated 3 firms. Firm A was a firm we had worked with before, and we had actually hired them before we decided to rebrand to do a quick study to see if we thought we needed to do the rebrand. They looked at a couple different options for us before we concluded that, yeah, we did want to do it. So they were invited to bid on the larger project. Firm B was also local to me. And that's where I had a friend over at that agency who had been a mentor to me early in my career. So a lot of trust, a lot of value placed with that individual. That firm was slightly larger than firm A, also still local. Firm C was not local. They were in Richmond, Virginia. This was before we acquired Joyce. We didn't have any presence in Richmond. I had never met anyone at that firm. I had no relationship with them, but they did have a lot of visibility in terms of having done a number of rebrands for firms in the architecture, engineering, and construction space. Those were the 3 firms we evaluated, and I'm going to give you guys a quick poll and ask you, who do you think won the work? Go ahead and take a guess. Okay, I will share the results. Oh, some people are changing their minds. That's good. Okay. And done. I'm going to share the results with you guys. So you'll see that 9% of you thought firm A got it probably because they did the study. 35% of you thought the local relationship would win out, and that was 35% of you. And then 57% of you chose firm C. So I will share the answer with you. And the answer is firm C. So, and the reason why I bring this up to you is because thinking that it would have been firm B with a long history of the relationship, or firm A because they did the study, is very reasonable guesses. But what we're seeing in the research that's out there is that generally speaking, there is a trend towards the future favoring the specialist. There's a couple of reasons for it. Younger decision makers, which, at the time I was, in my mid 30s, I certainly wasn't afraid of working with someone that wasn't local and using technology and Zoom meetings like this to get the work done. And that has only increased since I made this slide pre-pandemic. And then by and large, what we're seeing is that Generation X and millennials are significantly less relationship driven than boomers or the generations before. The expert that I mentioned that I had heard and seen was a guy named Tim Asmos, who actually was a former civil engineer who pivoted to marketing, just like me. But one of the things I like to mention is when I shared with you this slide before, and I talked about the magazines that I read and the conferences that I go to and the organizations I belong to, everything on this slide featured Tim. That's Tim at an SMPS event. That's Tim writing an author in the Marketer magazine, and so forth and so on. So if you're a specialist, it's really easy to actually target who might be interested in your work, which is to say that I never received anything from Circle S before I hired them. In fact, I actually picked them up and called them and said, hey, I have this project. Would you like to be considered to be part of it? Does anyone know what we call it when the prospect calls us instead of the other way around? Everyone's on mute. Well done, everyone, with your mute. The answer is inbound marketing, right? And so that's what we're talking about when we're talking about inbound marketing, which is the idea that firm C, which is Tim Asmos from Circle S, built trust with me before he even ever met me, right? And as a result, I called him instead of the other way around. Things that he didn't do, he never e-blasted me, cold called me, sent me a mailer. I never met him at any of the events we're at, although we were there together. He never gave me a brochure, set up a trade show booth, or gave me any free stuff. And miraculously, he won my work. So when we start talking about, all these strategies, it's not that they're bad. They're inbound strategy, or they're outbound strategies, which means we're interrupting our prospect. We're talking to them. We're trying to get their attention, versus inbound. Whereas when we're leading with content and expertise, and a prospect is reacting to that on their own time. So both strategies are totally relevant, totally valued. But when we talk about marketing, what we find is more often than not, the technical staff is coming to us seeking an outbound strategy. But really, we want to make sure you're aware that a two-pronged approach is probably what would work best. So we're going to talk a little bit more about inbound marketing before we get to proposals. So here's what we know about how clients buy. Again, your mileage may vary depending a little bit on who your client is specifically. Certainly how we buy a phase one is different than how we buy, a multi-million-dollar, multi-year project. Certainly a private sector buying process looks different than a state agency buying process. But by and large, this is what we can speak to generally about how our clients buy. There's four main phases. The first is learning, when they're researching and thinking about the issue at hand, what they're trying to solve. So in my case, it's definitely thinking about rebranding, things we got to take into account, how much is it going to cost, how long will it take us to do it, all those different things. Vetting is when we start kind of looking at who might be out there that can help us do that sort of thing, or maybe thinking about the criteria for who we might want to work with. Discussing is when we're actually evaluating the providers, like firm A, firm B, firm C. And then hiring is the contracting phase, when we're actually pulling the trigger, working through terms and conditions, all of those kinds of things. So most firms spend most of their marketing time and energy on the discussing phase. And at first glance, it makes sense, right? Because it is the closest to a project or opportunity that's real and that's funded. So it makes a ton of sense, right? To get close to that money, spend our money where it makes logical sense to do so. However, clients actually spend more of their time in the learning and vetting phases and much less time in the RFP phases, right? So we know that good clients do research and read. 50% of the C-suite in most industries, they're going to spend at least an hour a week reading industry information. And that specifically, we know that younger decision makers evaluate recommendations, do their own research and learning and vetting, and accept or reject them right off the get-go based on what they're seeing online. So even if you're doing a great job and you have earned a recommendation from one of your clients to a prospective client, you're not paying attention to learning and vetting, and that person that was recommended to you goes and looks and doesn't like what they see, they're not going to continue on with that recommendation to the RFP phase. So we don't want to lose those opportunities to reach people during learning and vetting phases. And that's really where the core of our marketing program is. What does learning and vetting look like? Here's some examples. Learning or researching is maybe attending an industry event or training session, doing online research, reading trade publications, browsing social media feeds, watching a webinar, signing up for a relevant email list, or joining a relevant LinkedIn group. Vetting is when you start to connect with people that can help you. So that might be connecting with somebody at a social or business event, interacting with someone at a trade show, attending an introductory meeting that someone's come in and asked to present their capabilities to you, asking a colleague for a recommendation, or again, continuing with the online research. And what we know is that some of these methods are more favored based on age than others, right? So you'll see the items in green tend to be more preferred by decision makers as they are now, sort of in that baby boomer generation, and that younger up and coming leaders and buyers tend to prefer the methods in blue. It's not to say that a millennial would never buy a project based on someone they met at a golf course, or that a boomer would never do any research online. Please don't come at me. It's not that black and white, but this is what research shows us is their preferred method. It's where they go first most of the time. So then we entered into the pandemic, right? And then a couple of these got really hard, right? So now all of a sudden the trade show stopped for a while. There weren't as many events. You couldn't really get an introductory meeting, at least not one in person. And so what that did is it really, really, really put pressure on these other techniques and methods for connecting with potential people who are interested in our services. So you'll see a lot of pressure on the online options, but also very viable. So what does it take to make inbound marketing work? The answer is you have to know who you're talking to, right? Just like when Tim is marketing, rebranding to architecture and engineering firms, he hangs out where the architecture and engineering marketers are, right? And it's the same case for whatever it is that you guys are selling. This is an article that Keith Barbarick wrote and we pulled in together, and we actually placed it in Water World magazine about the latest wastewater treatment plant we did in North Carolina. Now we could have probably, we could have probably reached more people if this would have been in, say, the Charlotte Business Journal. But I'm not trying to reach everyone, right? And that's a key point that you have to remember when we're talking about marketing. We're not Nike. We cannot reach everybody, and we're not trying to. I don't care if I reach someone with a piece of wastewater treatment plant content unless they manage a wastewater treatment plant, right? So that's why we placed this article in Water World magazine, where we reached lots of people who have similar wastewater treatment plant issues. The reason why I bring this up is a piece of water treatment content is no good to you if you're selling K-12, right? Just like a piece of K-12 content is no good for you if you're selling bridge design. So that means you cannot rely on other people in the company to create the content for you to reach the audience you're trying to reach. That's why we need everybody pulling on it for every type of client that we're trying to reach. This is another piece of inbound marketing that we worked on with Jenny Johnson down in Richmond. And you'll see this appeared in Solid Waste and Recycling magazine. Jenny leads our waste and recycling division, so it was a very suitable media outlet. But you'll notice here is that her piece isn't even about a project at all, right? You don't even need to have a state-of-the-art water treatment plant like Keith did in order to engage in inbound marketing. Here, Jenny is just talking about the state of the industry in general. And what she's doing is establishing that she works so much in this industry and she's got so much knowledge that her opinion on trends and impacts to the industry is valuable. And so that's where I wanted to take a minute and just touch base on the difference between expertise and experience, right? We tend to use these interchangeably, but they're actually not the same. They're both important. That the experience of our firm is what we've done, right? It's those similar projects. Expertise is what we know how to do, right? So expertise gives you the opportunity to have a conversation and learning and vetting about a meaningful or interesting take you may have on an issue or market, right? And then experience comes later in the buying process, and it provides proof and reassurance that you actually do know how to do the things that you say that you know how to do. So expertise, we demonstrate it through useful, relevant content. And experience is documented through case studies. So a lot of times we have plenty of experience in case studies, but that isn't enough to give people the dialogue that they need earlier in that process. So the difference I like to say here is the difference between showing versus telling. You can tell a prospect you've done $300 million worth of K-12 work, or you can show them by writing an article about what it means to design a K-12 classroom. right? So this is where we're trying to get both pieces of content, and you as PMs are going to have the opportunity to contribute to that because you're going to finish a project and you're going to build experience. And then once you've done a few, you're going to have hopefully some expertise that then you can share with a broader audience. So when we write to show expertise, it feels different than the technical writing that you guys probably do in the reports or other deliverables you send to clients. When we blog, that's one of the ways we start most of the time with an article. It's not like technical writing. You want it to sound like a person wrote it, not a company. And the important thing about inbound marketing is that you don't talk about yourself. You talk about what you have in common with the reader. So if you both have an interest in solar development, then you want to talk about trends around solar development, not all the great things that LaBella did just the other day. So, you know, we can talk offline more if you're interested in developing some of this content, but it's something that it's so important. It feels like it's not as important as answering the RFP, but I can tell you without doubt, it is that important because a lot of times people are deciding whether or not you can be included in some of those firms 1 through 3 that they're thinking about based on this sort of content. So the question is, can inbound marketing fail? Anyone know why inbound marketing might not work? Anyone wants to take a guess? Shout it out. Or I'll just tell you. Okay, so there's 2 ways inbound marketing can fail. The first is if it's too promotional. Inbound marketing, for it to work, it has to actually be helpful content. It has to be, if you think about me figuring out who I'm going to use for a rebrand, I want the article to actually be helpful, like 5 considerations to keep in mind when you're considering a rebrand. If it's just a thinly disguised sales pitch on why I should pick you, it's not that helpful. So oftentimes people are working on pieces, and if it starts to feel too promotional, we'll kick it back. And then the other reason why inbound marketing might not work is if nobody sees it, right? We're bombarded by thousands of messages every day, and everyone is creating content every day. I know there's a statistic out there that like more pictures are posted in an hour on Instagram than were created for the entire first 100 years the camera was invented, right? There's a lot of content out there. All you have to do is go on LinkedIn and you'll see there's tons and tons of content. So how we help our content get noticed and seen, there are a couple different ways we can do it. The most effective is to co-brand our content with a trusted content source. So when it appears in Water World magazine, it's a clue to water treatment plant operators that this is good content and it's been thoroughly vetted. Or we can team up with a trusted industry group to host our webinar, and they lend their credentials to it, and that lets people know, hey, this is a good quality piece of content. But the second way we can make sure that people see it is we're much more likely to read or view content that comes from someone we know, right? It's the whole prospect of social media. And that's why we're so adamant about everyone engaging on LinkedIn. And then we can also use other techniques. We use these much less often, which is to team up with an influencer, you know, somebody that has a lot of credibility in the space already. Or we can do paid advertising, which then would bump that piece of content up to the top of search results if we can't achieve that organically. So that's inbound marketing in a nutshell. Like I said, I like for everyone to kind of understand why it's important. It feels like it's not helping you bring work in the door, but I promise you it is. It's very important and it works. If with a good piece of content, I can get a lot more eyeballs on it than I could ever do, you know, just sponsoring a trade show. So keep it in mind as you're becoming project managers, look for those opportunities, and, you know, marketing is here and we can do a lot of the heavy lifting on creating this stuff. But we can't do it if nobody brings us the idea. So that's inbound marketing in a nutshell. Pivoting back to how clients buy, we're back to our little chart here. Let's talk about, between vetting and discussing, how we choose which provider we're going to go with. And it really comes down to what we know about logically how people make their decisions is points of parity versus points of differentiation. If you think about you're buying a car, right, you're going to probably be comparing a couple different makes and models. when you do that, what you're looking for are points of parity and points of differentiation. So you might be looking at 2 or 3 different cars, and your points of parity are they all have V6 engines, they all have sunroof, they're all available with leather, whatever that may be. And points of differentiation is how you start comparing the models, right? I like the styling on that one better. That one has a better warranty, whatever it may be. Think about car buying. It's a good analogy for buying a firm, believe it or not, because it's also high risk, high value, big decision making that people tend to spend a lot of time thinking through. The problem we run into with evaluating architecture, engineering, environmental consulting firms is that there's a ton of points of parity and everybody sounds the same, right? Everyone says our people are great. They're like family. Some people say their people are the best. Okay, great. Congrats. We're a leader in whatever it is the client is looking for. Here's a list of our services. Here's a list of our people. Here's a list of our projects. And everybody does it. And guess what? They're all qualified, right? That's the problem with this industry, is that if you suck at this, you will very quickly go out of business. So chances are whoever we're up against is qualified, right? And chances are they can complete the project and do a decent job at it. So how do we stand out? Well, I can tell you it's not with language like this, right? So this is some old copy from a bunch of different AE firms. And this is a quick question. I didn't put a poll in because I'm worried about time. But one of these firms is LaBella and one of them isn't. And I'll just read them to you quickly. And if you can tell which one LaBella is, I'll give you $1. Not really. Founded in 19 blah blah, with a staff of over blah blah professionals, we proudly serve our clients, partnering with them to achieve their goals. As a full-service professional consulting firm, we have the resources needed to manage all aspects of your project. Firm B says, through open communication and clear understanding, we provide an approach to professional service and consulting that allows our clients to improve their mission. Blah blah is committed to providing the best resources available to our clients. Our team of professionals provides the experience and knowledge necessary to develop successful solutions. Now pretend that your career hinges on picking one of these firms to work with, and tell me if you know which one you want to pick, right? My put money on you have no idea which firm is better than the other. And it's a huge problem, right? Our customers are faced with this all the time. I have another slide of this. I won't read through it. These are a bunch of different mission statements and they all sound the same. So if everyone's qualified, how do you differentiate? And the answer is really simple, and it's also really hard. You have to understand your client's problems better than anyone else. And that was how I ended up picking Circle S for a rebrand. So when I talked to all 3 firms and I kind of presented to them my problem, I said, look, we do architecture, we do environmental, we do, civil, we do all these different things, and the logo has to represent everybody and work for everybody. And I could tell those first 2 firms, they didn't really understand. They didn't really understand environmental. They didn't really understand the difference between civil and transportation. But Tim's team did, right? Because they had done a lot of work in AEC. And it's the same for your clients. They will choose you if they think you understand their issue better than the other competition. You can propose that you come up with better solutions than everyone else. That's where you could differentiate based on your design or your technical prowess. You could communicate the benefits of those solutions better, or you could provide stronger proof. That's better case studies, better testimonials, that your solutions really will solve their problems. Those are the main ways that you can differentiate in this industry. It's really hard to do. Here's the kicker. You can't do any of that if you don't know enough about the project. If all you know about the project is what's in the RFP, you will never be able to differentiate and prove that you can do this better than somebody else, because you all have the same information at that point. It's also really hard to do if you're just using boilerplate proposal content. The chances that your boilerplate proposal content speaks to that client better than everyone else are not high, right? Because boilerplate content is meant to appeal to a broad range of people and a broad range of problems. So here comes my next poll. Hopefully you guys are still with me. Sorry, I feel like I'm talking still. How much do you think the average proposal costs a firm? Go ahead and take a guess. Okay, ready? Here comes what you guys thought. So 22% came in at $2,000, 57% picked 5,000, 22 picked 10,000, and nobody picked 25,000. So 22% of you are right. And it is on the high end. Now, you guys might be skewed a little low because I know there's a lot of environmental team members on here, and I know that you guys tend to do more frequent, smaller proposals. So for you, that $5,000 might feel more accurate, and it may be. But when we consider across the board for most proposals, the answer is on average $10,000 when we consider the amount of time spent on like pre-proposal walkthrough, putting together the proposal from both your admin staff and technical staff, the time to prepare for an interview and go interview. It's a lot of money. Okay, $10,000. Of course, there are some things we chase. We have no business chasing, and we win and they land, and it like feels like you won the lottery and like, let's do more of this. So the one thing I would say is that just because we sometimes luck out, it doesn't make a good strategy. And it's really important to keep that in mind because there are always those anecdotal stories of things that we never thought we'd win, but we did. And it's not fiscally responsible, right? I mean, I think we'd all like some more money in the bonus pool at the end of the year. So consider that. I mean, it is money out the door when we chase something we shouldn't be chasing. So if you chase two rabbits, you will catch neither. The other thing I want you to keep in mind is that time spent on a low chance proposal is time that we can't spend doing other things, like relationship building, working on our inbound marketing, doing existing client maintenance, right? There's only a one finite pool of resources. So I want you to keep that in mind when you have the opportunity in your career to decide whether or not we're going to go after an opportunity. We have a go, no go decision-making matrix that assigns points depending on different criteria for the opportunity and helps us make a quantitative decision about whether or not pursuing work makes sense. You should always make sure you're having a conversation with your marketing coordinator because they're going to have the best sense for how much effort that RFP is asking for and how we will show, right? How we will show in terms of differentiating and experience. So,
Hey, Beth.
yeah.
I think someone had a question tying back to your latest poll question. Was that firms in general or just LaBella specifically?
Oh, that's firms in general. So that's industry-wide average cost.
Beth, do we know how LaBella stands up against that?
You know, that's a great question. I think the answer is probably no, and that probably stems back to, sort of our philosophy of putting down your best 40. I know that a lot of times on the technical side of staff that the proposal activity and effort really tends to happen outside of that. It's not really captured. I would say we're probably a little bit on the lower end just because we're not in like the highest value labor market, in terms of cost. But I think it would probably vary widely. And it would be certainly something great to capture. And it's also going to be average. So it's going to include full proposals with calls and letter proposals. So you kind of average them out a little bit.
Is there any value to spending a small amount of time responding to an RFP that you probably won't win just to get exposure for LaBella's name, especially regional offices?
Yep, I'm going to hit on that later at the end of the presentation. So I'll come back to that, Shelby, for sure. That's a great question. So, and I won't forget because I have a slide on it. So the next question we're going to ask is it wired, right? Which when the RFP comes out, is somebody lined up to get this work? And you may or may not know that, but one of the things I would really caution you guys is that there is always a front runner, right? And I'll just use my own personal experience. Again, we're in the process of redeveloping our website. I went through an RFP process with a number of consultants to provide website design services. And even before I issued that RFP, I knew who the front runner was based on the research I had done on the firms before I issued the RFP. So this is where it really comes back to, remember, the client is spending much longer researching and vetting pre-RFP than they are going to spend reviewing proposals. This idea, like, is it wired? This is also where political considerations come into play. So if you're working in one of those markets where whether or not we've supported, the mayor or the county executive comes into play, yeah, a lot of that stuff is already being determined before the RFP. And again, the more you're in front of the owner or the client doing in those researching and vetting phases, the more we're going to be able to answer this question with intelligence, right? There's sometimes you may not know, but generally speaking, if you've done the pre-work, you should be able to answer this question and know who the front runner is, even if it's not us. Doesn't mean we can't win it, but it's nice to know if we know there is a front runner. So here's the thing about the proposal pile. So if you're the client and you get these proposals in and you've got to pick a firm, I think I've already demonstrated that it can be really hard to find differentiation amongst the proposals you receive. You should know that the first thing proposal reviewers are looking to do is to disqualify, not to select. And that's human nature. If you've got 15 proposals and you don't want to read all of them, the first thing you're going to do is look for someone that missed something so you can get rid of one to read, right? So therefore, the number one rule of putting a proposal together is that you must follow the RFP to the letter in terms of requirements. If they ask for page limits, follow them. Put the materials they've asked for in the order they've requested them so they can go through and check them off that they're there. Make the required elements easy to find, which means we use tabs and headings. If you can be thrown out for minor mistakes, this is a really good reason why we're always asking for the proposals to be done sooner than we're getting it. It's so we can do QA, QC. Otherwise, that $10,000 is out the door for something dumb, and we don't want that to be the case. Now, in order to have the proposal most likely be read, we need to make sure we're avoiding some very common mistakes, which is the reviewer does not want a lot of fluff, right? It shows that you don't value their time. They don't want to search through a bunch of text to try to find what they're looking for. Don't want to speak in industry jargon. You should know, hopefully, who's reviewing the proposals, but if you don't, assume they're a lay person and that they don't understand the nuances of your technical expertise. Don't just regurgitate the RFP. Hopefully the reviewer had a hand in the RFP and they already know what it says. Concise language is powerful. Have you ever seen the quote, I would have written a shorter letter, but I didn't have the time? Writing things clearly and concisely is a skill and it takes a lot of work. But that's exactly what the reviewer is looking for. And the more you can personalize the prospect, the better. Again, that's to show differentiation, that you can solve their problem better than anyone else. You want to speak right to them and every opportunity you have to do so. Here's the thing also, they probably aren't going to read the whole thing, right? Again, human nature, if it's a really thick one, they're not going to read the whole thing. That's why our templates are set up to use pull quotes to emphasize the key messages and takeaways. And all of our project sheets have captions, and that's specifically for reviewers not reading through the entire project sheet. Use those captions to highlight what it is we really want them to see or take away from that particular case study or proof. The one thing I would say is that we spend a lot of time and energy researching best practices on our proposal templates. Please follow them. Please don't argue with us about them. I promise you they are grounded in research and that we have spent a lot of time working with professional graphic designers to make sure that they are as effective as they can possibly be. The other thing I want you to know about the proposal pile is that there's no grand finale. So don't think you're saving your best stuff for the end. Your best stuff has to go in that cover letter. You have to make your one-page case for why LaBella is the firm to hire. That should really be serving as an executive summary that clearly and persuasively outlines the reason why LaBella is the firm to work with. ultimately, when clients make a decision, they're making it based on risk. So what we want to do is address, what is the client's pain point? What are they concerned about? What does success look like to them? What risks are they worried about? And what are the risks to hiring us? And how can we mitigate those? Testimonials reduce perceived risk. It's the same way when you're going to buy that thing from Amazon and you're not sure if it's real, if it's from China or whatever, and you read those reviews. Those are really, really powerful. So that's why Brittany's going to talk to you about the importance of collecting those client testimonials next time. But ultimately, in order to win, we're conveying expertise, empathy, authenticity, and passion. And that's it in a nutshell. Expertise that you can technically give them what they need, empathy for their problem and their concerns, authenticity and that you really are who you say that you are, and passion that you're going to work your butt off for them. That's what they're looking for. It's also the key to interviews. I can't tell you how many questions I fielded about interviews, people bickering about, should we send 3 people? No, we should send 10 people. Should we, have a PowerPoint? No, you shouldn't have a PowerPoint. Should we have a handout? No, we shouldn't have a handout. And you're missing the point, which is that you need to convey those 4 things. The only way to convey those 4 things in a presentation setting is to practice, 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 rehearse with a real audience that will give you real feedback about how you're coming across, and incorporate their feedback. That's all there is to it. And I know we have a long history in this company of baseball metaphors, but I'm a college basketball girl, and I love this quote, is don't think about what it's going to take to win the project, right? Think about practice. I know so many interview teams that go in and they want to win, but they refuse to practice. Do you know anything you can do where you can just walk in and win and be successful without practicing? I can't think of a single one, right? So don't skip the interview practice. It's really, really, really important. If the interview has no prescribed structure and you've just got 30 minutes to present and you're kind of looking at each other going, I don't know what this means, or maybe you're asked to be on an interview team and you've never done it before, this is how we should structure our interview, which is that you want to touch on the issues, which is their essential challenge or problem. So an example with this would be, this is a K-12 example, but the project must be complete before school starts. If that's their hottest button, then that's what we're going to talk to. The features, what we have to solve the problem. So features might be that we have a big firm with lots of manpower, SED relationships, an in-house environmental. Then we need to explain why those features benefit them. So our in-house environmental means we're not going to be delayed by the discovery of regulated materials. We can create a project schedule that allows for SED review. Both of those things might shorten our design time, but we won't lose quality because we have a big enough staff to get it done in the shorter time period. That's how you connect those dots and talk about how they benefit them. I can't tell you how many times people want to go in an interview and harp on being full service or harp on the fact that we have some other feature, but can't connect it to how it's a benefit for the client. If the client doesn't care about full service, it's not a feature they care about. So we've got to pull it back into how it benefits them and their project. Then lastly, proof. You want to show some evidence of your claims, right? So an example in this example would be, here's a specific project that we completed in a shorter time frame. So here's the proof that we can actually deliver this and address your hot button issue. So what we call these win themes, right? And there's a reason why Harry Potter is on here, and that's because this is just storytelling 101. And that's a lot of what marketing is, right? It's telling a story. It's not a list of bullets. It's telling a story and creating a picture. So here's where I'm going to get to, and this is my second to last slide, to Shelby's question, which is what happens when we lose, right? The tribe has spoken, or has it? So if you lose, you're going to want to ask for a debrief. It's great if you get a debrief if you win too, because then you can know why they chose you. But you want to debrief externally from the client or prospect, and then also internally. Let's take a look at what went well and what didn't go well, right? Did we not finish our approach until an hour before the proposal went out? And if so, why? And how can we make it better for next time? A third party is the best person to collect feedback Brittany's going to talk a lot more about feedback in your next session, so I won't spend a lot of time on that. But that's most likely your marketing coordinator is going to get them to be super honest about why it is they didn't actually choose you. It's hard for you to ask that. If you can find out where we fell on fee, it's super helpful because it just helps us clue in for somebody else being a similar job. And then you want to put whatever you learn into CRM so that other people can see it and learn from it and benefit from it. And here's Shelby's question, which is, can you turn a no into an opening for other opportunities? My answer is I hate this technique, first of all, mostly because it's time and energy that I could spend doing something that would be more effective. It's okay if you think you're going to come in a close second, right? Because then at least you showed really well, and then maybe there's an opportunity to go after it. But if you didn't show that well, then you have introduced the firm to someone in a negative light. Number one, you've wasted $10,000, and you could have done a number of other techniques that might have cost less and been more effective and open the door in a more positive light. So I would just redirect that energy to saying, you know, if there's someone you want to reach and they're involved with, say you're down in the South and they're involved with SWANA, the Solid Waste and Recycling Association or whatever, and you know they're involved in that group, I would much rather spend the time and energy getting an article by you published in that group's publication, getting you a speaking engagement with that group, doing a meet and greet, really pinpoint targeting. There's a lot of other marketing techniques I would use to warm that relationship for you before I'd send a cold proposal in that isn't going to show well. So that's sort of my answer there. If you think that proposal will show really well, it's possible. You know, you can use then a debrief as an opportunity to get in front of them. But again, how well you're going to show really depends on how much do you know about the project. If you don't know that much about the project, there's a chance you can really miss the mark. When I got proposals to do our website project, I had one proposal that was way off in terms of what we were actually looking for, and it was because it was a cold proposal. So if you don't know them that well and you just taking a shot in the dark, I don't think that's a good use of time or money or resources. So we made it, guys. That's the end. I'm happy to have dialogue on any of these concepts. Like I said, Brittany's going to talk on some client experience stuff that's going to kind of go along with some of this stuff. But I hope that it gives you a little bit of understanding on why we're always looking for articles and blogs and, you know, get you thinking about the process of winning work beyond just the RFP. Because I know that that's always the most pressing, the most deadline driven, and it's really easy to get swallowed up in that RFP process without considering how it fits in to the overall marketing picture. So I'm really.
Kat, I don't know if you wanted to close us out.
I do actually. I wanted to share my screen real quickly, just so see if I can get it to work this time. Let's see here. It says I'm screen sharing. Can you see my screen where I'm on the marketing page on LaBella today? Yay. Okay. So I would suggest that everybody take a look, if they haven't already, during their career here, take a look at the marketing page. There's a lot of good resources here. So it describes to you who's who in marketing. There's information on the social media policy, marketing versus business development. There's also 2 links on the side that are important, one of which is CRM Central, which Beth mentioned in her presentation. CRM is for customer relationship management is what that means. And it is a module that we have in Deltek. And that's where we, as project managers, are managing our opportunities and entering in our information about our projects and our clients and our efforts that we're going after. So there's some good resources here for you to take a look at. There's a separate training video. Some of this will be discussed by Chris LaPel and Brittany in the sessions that they're going to be doing coming up, but I wanted to bring your attention to that, as well as to the fact that much like the safety program, there's a program called the Marketing Pursuit Program, which the safety program was actually modeled on, because this I thought was very nicely done, and there's no reason to reinvent the wheel if something's already working well. But there's certain things in here that as you begin your project management career and or you're working on projects, there are opportunities here for you to win marketing pursuit pipe pieces. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention and make sure you realize that LaBella today is really a key way that the company communicates information out to everybody. Everybody, I highly recommend everybody goes on the website every single day to see what's new, because this is where we post updates on the various programs, including the project management program, safety program, and whatnot. And yeah, so that's a lot of good stuff there, a lot of good things that Beth covered, and there'll be more interesting stuff coming up in the coming weeks. So if any of you guys, if you have any quick questions before we close out, I know we're done with our time. All right, I'm not seeing any raised hands unless I'm missing one. So thanks everybody for coming today. Appreciate it. And Heather will be circulating a feedback form. If you would all please fill that out and send it back so that we can gather data and continue to refine the program as we move forward, that would be fantastic.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.